Hello friends, this is Nitin and I welcome you to my startup podcast channel Jazar Audio where we share real stories with real learnings. My guest speaker today is Piyush Surana. Piyush is principal at Tomorrow Capital, a $100 million venture fund based out of Mumbai. So prior to this, Piyush had held leadership positions in various unicorns like Zomato, Uber, and Ola. And in this podcast, Piyush will share key insights on the importance of founder market fit, some of its key 4-5 signs, and the advice for startups who have certain gaps in the founder market fit. Hi Piyush, welcome to Jazar Audio and thank you for talking to us.
Hey Nitin, glad to be here and thanks for inviting me on the show.
So Piyush, let's start with the importance of founder market fit. Why do investors look for it, especially during the pre-seed startups?
Yeah, so Nitin, let me go back to the basic on this, right? And as an investor, what do you want when you're investing in startups, right? I think you want returns on your investment, which in this case is anyway set to the value of the company, right? So how do you get that? I mean, Finance 101 says that, value of a company is the present value of future cash flow. Now in early stage companies, you don't really have any cash flows. Right. And the future is anyways very uncertain, right? There's no point valuing something based on your own assumption because that doesn't work out very well. So the only thing really certain at a very early stage startup is the quality of the founders and your belief in them and their ideas. True. And the conjunction of those two is actually what drives your perception of value. So, over a period of time, the business and the idea might change and morph, but the right founders with the right idea will eventually make it happen. And that is the belief that we all go in with. And that is why it's important for us to have the correct founder market fit.
Great. So can you share some 3-4 signs which indicates a strong founder market fit?
So, everyone looks at it differently. So I think the 3 or 4 things that I would typically look at. First, what we ask is a unique insight or idea, right? Yeah. I mean, while experience is important, if you look at the history of innovation, whether it's corporate or whether it's in, the larger world of science, I think a lot of new ideas come from people who are relatively new to the field but understand it well, right? They're not so involved in it that they are not able to think of new ideas. So what we look for is, founders who have a unique insight that can drive change or can change the way industry works. Okay. And so typically the first thing we look for is a unique insight or idea, right? The second thing we look for is passion, right? And this is something that tells to a lot of young guys who are just starting out or who want to do something of their own. Because if you go back to campus nowadays, Nitin, the first thing you hear is half the students saying they want to do something of their own rather than doing a corporate job, right? True. But what I tell to them a lot of time is that, being a founder sounds very, sort of enticing from the outside, but, it is one of the toughest and loneliest jobs you can do. A good team and a good journey, sort of a good investors will make it easier. But without passion, it will be a very long and a hard journey. And that is where a lot of people burn out because they do it for the wrong reasons, right? Don't do it for the lifestyle. Don't do it because of reasons like, I want to be my own boss. Do it because you are really passionate about an idea and that will give you the energy to see it through to reality. Yeah. The third thing that we specifically look at as investors are, a lot of building a company is sort of a learning process and a journey of discovery. A lot of times the business that ends up is not what it started out as, right? So while you need to be confident, you also have to have the flexibility as a founder or as a founding team to be able to take on board ideas and to keep refining your ideas. Yeah. So hold them loosely. You should not be very stuck on those ideas. Yeah. And I think the last thing that I like to repeat to founders is that they have to have the ability to sell. A founder is always selling, every action that you take in an entrepreneurial venture involves selling something to someone. You're selling to your customers. You're also selling to your investors and advisors and mentors who invest time and money in you. You are selling to your early employees to believe in you. You're even selling your suppliers to work with you, right? Because at early stage, you don't have the same wherewithal as a large corporation. So in short, you're selling all the time. Yeah. In the beginning, you sell possibility. As time passes, you sell evidence, right? So if sales is something that you don't want to do, and there are different types of salesmen. You don't always have to be that flamboyant, charismatic salesman. There are different types of salesmen. Steve Jobs and Bill Gates are two very different personalities, right? So there are different types of salesmen, but you have to be able to sell as a founder. So those are the 4 large things that I would think of.
Okay. So what questions do you ask to gauge a startup's founder market fit?
See, a lot of the conversations that actually take place with founders are quite organic. So we don't typically go in, thinking this is what we'll ask. It evolves as we learn more about the business. But there are few things that we want to hear, right? I think first of all, we would like to hear the story of, why they're doing what they're doing. Because I think the why is very important. Like I mentioned, the passion and the reason of doing it is very important. So we would like to understand the journey, right? How they came upon the idea. Why did they decide to pursue it? We get really deep into how they they think about it, whether they've thought to the second and third level problem rather than just the surface problem, because that shows how passionate they are about it and how serious they are. So that's one thing that we typically like to do a lot. It helps us understand the quality of their insight. The other thing that we like to understand from them is, what is unique about the business. And it goes back to like what I said, what we look at when we look at founder market fit is what is the unique idea behind the business. Okay. So, and then we like to compare it against, do your customers agree with you? Because it also gives us a sense of, how in tune with reality they are, how much in touch with their own customers they are. Yeah. So that is something that we like to do. Sometimes in a lot of cases, we even ask them to connect us to a few of their customers so we can ask those questions as well directly, right? Okay. That's something that we love to do. We often like to debate over opposing viewpoints, right? Because when you talk and get in details and nitty-gritties of a company, which we love to do, there'll be areas where you think, there's a certain other way of doing things. And so we love debating viewpoints because not only does it gives us an idea about if the founders are flexible, yeah, but it also gives us an idea about how they think about things, how they reach to conclusions, right? Whether they are more data-driven or more gut-driven. Yeah. And both is fine, but in the right places, right? It's just good to understand how they react to opposing viewpoints, and that's something that we love to do. And I think finally, and the last thing that I would suggest that you look at is, we look to split the role between the role of a founder and the role of a leader, because those are two typically different things, right? And the way we probably sometimes ask that is, what happens if one day you are no longer the right person to lead the company? And so what happens then? And we like to get their viewpoints on it. So those are some of the questions we ask, but like I said, it's a very organic process, yeah, and changes over a period of time.
Cool. And what advice will you give to the startups who have certain gaps in their founder market fit?
I think the first thing that you need to do, see, at an early stage of a journey, we rarely ever find a team that has all the bases covered, right? I mean, वो नहीं होता. That in fact, in very early stages, even the founding team, you would rather look at jack of all trades rather than very specialized people, right? Because everybody needs to do everything. And so it's quite possible that all the bases are not covered, right? So that's right. 3 or 4 things that, especially as the kind of operational investors that we are, there are 3 or 4 things that we like to sort of talk to. Okay. One is spend more time with your customers, right? I mean, that is where you genuinely get your insight from. You may think your idea is really good, strong, whatever. It's not worth anything if the customer is not willing to pay for it, right? The second is be open to advice or change, especially if, there are areas of the business that the founding team does not cover completely. Yeah. You should be open to, sort of taking on board sort of support. Exactly. Yeah. And so see, a lot of businesses actually develop into very different beasts than what they set out to be. I think I mentioned this before also. But that is the nature of startups, right? You don't know exactly what is going to happen once you start. So I think they need to be flexible and be open to advice. Right? The third thing that we like to advise them is build out a kick-ass team as you go along. As and when you have the bandwidth and you have the right, start hitting the right kind of metrics, start increasing the size and scope of your experiment, you have to hire people who are better than you at what they do, right? Because that is when you start then going into specialization. So, a lot of people you hear saying, hire someone better than you. That's very generic. How do you know he's better than you or not? What I'd like to qualify is hire someone better at what they do, right? Mm-hmm. As a founder, it is not possible for you to be good at finance and marketing and sales and UX and tech. So focus on what you do. Focus on the areas where you need to, and for other areas you need to have people you can trust to do their job, right? So hire that kind of a team. And then, find advisors and investors who can support you and make that journey easier. Choose very carefully. I know in early stage companies, I've seen a lot of companies get it very wrong when it comes to both of those. So I've seen people, give out a lot of equity to mentors. Ideally, a good mentor will not ask you for equity. They should be people you trust. Ideally, people who have some sort of startup experience themselves would really help. And then, find the right investors for yourself. I think especially for teams where they know that some of the bases are not covered, it makes a lot of sense to go sort of hire, go for investors who can add value other than money also, right? Who can give you specialized knowledge, open doors for you, make connections, even help you hire the right teams. So that is really important.
Finally, can you share an example of any startup in which Tomorrow Capital invested solely because of a strong founder market fit?
Yeah, and this ties in beautifully actually with the point I was making just before, right? So I'll talk about our first investment, which is a company called Genrico.
Okay.
Very interesting. Really strong founders. So IIT Bombay founders, they understood the product very well. They had done a lot of analysis around the market. They actually started as a software product for generic drug replacement,
Yeah.
and then eventually they built it out into something very different, which was a chain of retail pharmacies, right? So we started talking to them when they had just opened the second store. So they had two stores in Bombay. They understood, like I said, they understood the product very well. They understood the market very well, the supply chain very well. They understood the the back end tech and how to scale that very well. Now the thing was, they had never sold anything in their life, right? And that is where I talk about letting people in who can help you, because as investors, after we invested, we actually went in. One of the principals actually created the entire marketing playbook for them, hired the right kind of team before moving out. One of the principals was actually running sales for them until we helped them hire the right sort of candidate, someone who was like a really kick-ass candidate and handling a really large account with one of the largest corporations in India, and helped hire them as head of sales for them before we moved out.
Yeah.
And so when we invested in them, this was in March 2018. We invested very early stage investors. Like I said, a lot of the money we paid for was more for potential than actual business metrics. They were at 2 stores.
Okay.
In 15 months, we scaled them up to 35 stores.
Absolutely.
And we picked up a round of money that was about 10x of the valuation, right? So I think when you can find the right founders and then you can add sort of more fuel to their growth, you get these kind of like success stories, right? Those are great founders. They probably would have gotten there themselves, but probably not at the same speed, not with the same kind of strong foundation. So we helped set up the entire marketing team, the entire finance team, the entire compliances team. The basics that founders, we don't want the founders to spend too much time on. Set up the right MIS system. So I think it's a mix. So you have to find founders who understand the market really well and have a strong passion and idea and all. But then you can you find the right people to help them that accelerate that growth and create everything around that.
Awesome. That completes our podcast. Piyush, thank you for sharing some wonderful insights with the whole of the startup ecosystem, and was pleasure to have you on board.
Absolutely, Nathan. Great talking to you, and I hope this adds value to people.
Oh, definitely.
Lastly, I want to thank all the listeners who took their valuable time to listen to this podcast. Keep rocking, be safe, and don't forget to share.